Welcome to the Crazy House World Championship Candidates. And tonight we have the real deal. Catask, who's in the lead when it comes to game percentage, is facing JannLee, the former world champion. The winner in the Crazy House World Championship will face the reigning world champion Yasugi99. And both Catask and JannLee are undefeated in this tournament. JannLee drew against Bugzilla and has won the rest of his matches. And Catask has won all his matches, several with a 10-0 margin. And I'm not sure, even if JannLee wins 10-0, if he can overcome Catask at the top of the tournament, because when we look at the standings, JannLee is in the lead. He has one match, this one remaining. Opervesen has already finished, so he cannot catch JannLee, and Catask is only in third, but he has 4 matches remaining. And given that he has won so many matches by huge margins, he is on his way to win the Candidates tournament. And if we look at the players, let's see if they are logged in. I see JannLee. I don't see Catask quite yet. JannLee is sitting on a stable 2700 Crazy House rating. And Catask has an impressive 2957 Crazy House rating. So he's rated more than 200 points above JannLee at the top of the Crazy House World Champion, Crazy House World Ranking, I should say. So I expect that Catask will win this match, probably by 6-4, 7-3 or something. But I most certainly expect also some spectacular Crazy House games. Yes, it's happening. We have all been waiting for this match. And when Catask arrives, we will look at the games from his view. Oh, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you. So we're just waiting for Catask and JannLee. Any predictions from the audience? Who do you think will win and by how much? This is going to be a slight clash of styles, I think. JannLee relies on his great feeling for the game. And I have a confession to make. He actually plays this game as I probably would have played it had I continued to play these games 20 years ago when I just quit playing Bug House and Crazy House. Well, Crazy House wasn't that big at all then. Only a few players played Crazy House back then. Well, let's hope JannLee has slept. He's in Australia, by the way, and I'm not sure where Catask is from. He's sort of a mystery guy. Catask, on the other hand, he's something else. He has no real weaknesses, I would say. The only time in this tournament that he was in a little bit of trouble was against my fellow countryman Zixon, who did his best to randomize the games. And that is not how I expect JannLee will play this. But maybe, let's see what his game plan is. Because Catask is so strong in all parts of the game. He has the openings, he has the feeling for the game, the tactical ability, and he's a super strong defender, and he is fast. Hi there, okay, and hi everybody. Hi Opper. Well, what should I call you these days? I noticed you skipped your Opperwesen account. So still no. Well, I can see catask now, and the match has started. Sorry. Let's go back the first few moves, and we see a d4, d5 opening. JannLee playing very ambitiously here on the king side. A fianchetto with the pawn on g5, which creates some weaknesses here on the light squares, but also gives this light squared bishop a garage to tuck the bishop away, maybe. I'm not sure if white benefits from this move, but I mean, this bishop can always retreat now, so maybe it's to his advantage. I was just saying I would probably have played bishop d3 just to get rid of this bishop if possible. So now we're back on track. This is the same thing as if black would have gone to f5 in one move and white plays h4. So catask has spent some time here in the opening. Yeah, speaking of the finisher, I just want to say that to everyone, if you don't know, the finisher has withdrawn from the candidates. He was too far behind in the playing schedule. Oh, J Killer. So, nice to have a little audience here. Quickly taking back with the bishop rather than the pawn. And I do like taking with the bishop in this particular position, because it's a bit annoying to have the pressure here on f6. Sometimes you can, I suppose you can take on f6 and then play a knight to h5 or f4 or some combination of that. Inviting c6, which would open c7 to a check with a knight. And maybe bishop b5 check caught JannLee off guard here. Because this pin is a bit annoying. G4 is weak as well. Once you start capturing here on e4. I'm thinking bishop takes and maybe knight g3 if you take back with the pawn. Black's position is a little bit shaky here. Maybe you need to castle just to take care of the pin. So this is another way of doing it. Tricky move, because if you take here you will take on f5. Now the f5 is open. White would love to castle here, putting pressure on the f5. Well, why not castle now? I'm sure white is happy to give queen for a couple of light pieces. I'm thinking castle, knight takes here, and you take on f5 with either the rook or the bishop, I'm not sure which. And white looks to be in great shape, I think. You could also throw in a knight check here on c7 at some point. Yep, there is it. There is. White castle's short. And this is looking difficult for black, I would say. You could check here, because if king f8, you have knight at e6. So the king would have to go in this direction. So white simply protects his pawns, overprotects them. And white has a lot of options here. Putting pressure on the weaknesses here. You could play rook b1. I'm a little surprised though that he didn't go for the knight check on c7. Both players a little low on time here. Down to 20 seconds. I feel they are a little nervous. And this is a great move, opening up the dark squares. g5 is weak as well. Looks like white found a way into the black position here. You could play knight f4 maybe, yeah. White is looking to put his pawn here on g5 as soon as possible, and this pin is just so annoying. And pawn here, and the pressure is just too great. Threatening h5, all because of this pin. And now you have a bishop also, you can just increase the pressure. And now you can bring the king out on the board. Everything coming with check. That's like a self-playing piano here. h5 is hanging, not possible to protect it. So how do you wrap this up? Maybe take here, while g4 is hanging as well. Everything wins for white here. So calmly just picking up a lot of material here. You can just check on this diagonal, well, with this bishop as well. White picking up a lot of stuff here. And I'm looking forward to the next game. Don't lose some time now, catask. There's stuff going on here. Notice the rook of the b file. I'm surprised that he's still alive. But what did he do now? Black has a ton of stuff here. No, no, no. What did he do? It's at least a draw for black here, but can he find a mate? Yeah, he's going for the mate, of course. And where's the mate? There it is. Queen f5. Wow! Wow, what a surprise! What a surprise! He messed that up, catask. And you see what a fantastic defender JannLee is. He must have missed so many chances to mate there, catask. Well, you could see a bit of nerves there from catask. And that's always interesting. So, this d5 move shuts off the protection for the knight on d4. Looking like prep here for JannLee. Interesting idea, because if you take here, you can take on d4. And catask is thinking here. So, Opervezin is saying this is good for black. But maybe he's lagging. Okay. Because in this particular position, I'm not sure what to do with black, actually. I have a bad feeling here for black. So that's interesting. You're inviting capture here, but then you can trade queens and take on e4. Nice find here by... Nice find by catask. And probably the only move in the position, I'd say. So, what's happening here? Nice centralization, but look out for the queen checks here on the back rank. That's a nasty check. And white doesn't have a diag for d7. Suddenly this just looks awful for white. What exactly went wrong there? Nice little check, putting pieces on the board. No good way to intercept. And now you can pick up c6 with a threat on the queen. That's really nice. And also you have queen a5 check. In case a bishop takes here, you can always check on a5 and then take on d4. So JannLee resigns. Quick comeback there by catask, who outsmarted JannLee in the opening. Yeah, that was bad preparation. So this is exactly the same opening as we saw. No, as a matter of fact, it's not, because then JannLee put his bishop on g4. And he's choosing a more modest setup here with the pawn on g6 rather than on g5. Catask quickly trying to trade that light square bishop. Notice that he hasn't developed his knight yet. If you develop your knight early, black can always dance away to g4. And personally, I always like when my opponent takes on d3, because I like the semi-open c-file, the strengthening of the center. I think this is slightly better for white. Generic maneuver here, when you can put your rook on g1. The king is a bit safer here in the corner. So a slight positional advantage here for white. Yeah, maybe it should be illegal. So black gives a piece for 2 pawns, but he doesn't have any squares other than on his side of the board. And then I don't think the 2 pawns are quite enough for the piece, actually. It would be different. There would be a difference if he had like a pawn on e4 when he could start an attack. But right now, white is in the driver's seat here, having the initiative. So you could trap the bishop here with the pawn on g5 maybe. I wonder what Catask's idea is. So this looks like a critical position. You need to find the right move. JannLee trying to build a fortress here of pawns. Probably slowly expanding in the center. And this bishop needs to be careful so it doesn't get trapped. Do you go this way so you cannot play e5 because of knight takes e5 maybe? So maybe a bishop here on h5. These pawns are actually quite impressive, and they are not so passive as they might look, because they are going to start advancing soon. Catask goes on the attack instead. Let's say take. Okay, I'm a bit surprised that JannLee didn't take, actually. I'm wondering if Catask wants to drop a pawn on h5 maybe, and then take here, and then suck the king out even further. So this knight protects the rook and also protects g6. I'm not sure if this is a bluff or what it is. I mean, black could take on h5. Is white hoping for some sort of discovered attack here and then take with the queen on h5? I don't quite get this. Better safe than sorry. JannLee just keeps protecting his pieces. So this not only protects this rook on f7, but also protects f5. So slight problem here on the light squares for JannLee. It's not possible to protect this guy from behind, but he has won some material here, so wow, what's happening here? So now the d5 pawn is loose. JannLee doing his best, trying to cover all the squares he can. But now the queen can take on g5, and you have rook at h7 coming. So notice that this is very useful. No tricksy knight checks here somewhere. The king's just slightly safer in the corner. So how do you do this as white? Well, you could probably just take on h7, threatening queen at g8. So a mate coming here on g8. Well, JannLee sacrificed his queen. And this time catask is not going to mess things up. So you can take on g7 and you can take on g8. 2-1 catask. That was a strong, strong attack. He was like a boa constrictor, just squeezing that air out of JannLee's lungs. It was probably defendable, the position for black, but it was so hard to see how to defend. Okay, so now we see catask playing the king side fianchetto. And black would love to trade his rather passive knight for this bishop, I think. But it does take some time. And it does leave the white knight on e5 alone. And he didn't play h6. So white has the opportunity to put something on h6. But white has so few pieces in hand. So looks hard to make anything out of it. So rather passive setup here by catask. He's fighting for the dark squares here on the, and maybe you push the h pawn now. I'm not sure. So this is a very interesting idea by catask. He's simply ignoring the h6 idea that is so common. Instead he's putting pressure here with the bishops and the knight. But let's say you just take here and push the f pawn. Are the bishops really that good here on the long diagonal? d4 is safely protected, I would say, by the pawn and the knight. So I would take here and I would play f3. And maybe these bishops are just looking a little bit silly. Well, this is more or less the same idea. Black is a little cramped here. So maybe it's a good idea to finally play h6. Well, catask won a lot of time there anyway. But how to solve the development of his queenside pieces, I don't know. White has a natural move with his rook, but this rook is not getting out, and there's no good square for this bishop. So it looks a little better for white, I would say. So this bishop replacing the old bishop. Actually, this gives black the chance to get rid of his bishop. I don't think it was good to play knight g4. This bishop looked passive. And now finally the rook can, if black wants to, can leave a8. So I would not allow this bishop to be traded. I think that trade favored black. Black, who actually decides to give up a piece for a pawn just to get some something going here. And what's happening here? This knight is just hanging. That looked like a blunder. That was a blunder for sure. Just hanging a piece. Okay, let's see if JannLee can bring this game home. He has a lot of stuff. He needs to place it on the board. Putting a bishop on g4 looks like a good idea, or a knight for that matter. Eyeing h6. So white has three pieces here waiting in line. He needs to put them on the board, otherwise he won't be able to make anything of his extra material. So e7 is threatened. No, I'm sure it wasn't intentional, and catask actually resigned. The position was just hopeless. He was disgusted with his blunder. And resigning there shows a lot of respect for JannLee. I'm sure catask would have kept trying against pretty much anyone else. But this is nice. It's 2-2, and you can see that even Mr. Perfect catask has some flaws. So this is very tricky. It was a good opportunity to play knight e4 because white cannot take because of the pin here. And JannLee playing very optimistically. with g5 here. Let's see if we can make this work. I have a feeling that black is doing just fine here, actually. With the bishop here pinning the knight. A lot of flexibility. He can castle if he likes to. He can even start pushing the h pawn at some point. So h4 is very aggressive, but that leaves a hole here on f2. I wonder if black can make something of this. So some kind of taking here and bishop g5 or knight g5. The white pieces are not so well coordinated right now, but black has some weaknesses here also. So this is a very natural move, pinning the knight. Probably wanting to take on c3 and play knight at e4. So there's a huge hole here in the black position, threatening the bishop on g7. But maybe you can get away with something like bishop f6. Because let's say you take twice here on h6, you can always check here and get back the knight. And actually this is kind of annoying, taking here and putting a knight on e4. And this knight protects h7, so there is no pawn-pawn attack going on. I would have liked to preserve this bishop, actually, but maybe pawn at e5 was a problem. Wow, catask making use of the whole board here, threatening the rook, and possibly not bishop takes f7 incoming. Immediately got a couple of pieces, 3 pieces for that queen, and that's just too much. This rook now covering all the squares on the 4th rank, so there's no knight e4. Well, the bishop is covering e4 as well. The king will end up somewhere here in the corner eventually. How do you do this? Rook e2 looks natural. And simply knight c5. Yeah, that king is not going anywhere. And he's trying, JannLee is trying. This bishop covering b7. All white needs now is a knight for a5. Yeah, you could just play bishop here and another bishop here on d7. So this looks pretty forced. Rook here, so this comes with check. and he resigns. 3-2 catask, and they are battling it out in d4, d5. So a lot of nuances here in the opening. Notice the bishop g4 and then falling back to f5. So I reckon they think that h3 is a slight concession. And we could see the same thing here for black if he played h6 and JannLee went back to f4. Some catask deviates here, putting the pawn on f6 instead. So he's probably going to continue with bishop d6, knight e7, castle short. And what does JannLee do? e3, bishop d3 probably. Because it's a little bit weak here. Well, this is another way to put the finger on this weakness. I suppose sometimes you could just go queen g4. The black pawn formation is slightly loose here, but also when the pawns are doubled like this, it does open up lines for the rooks, and capturing towards the center increases the control of the center. So unless white can utilize the slight disorientation here of the black pieces, black will be doing just fine here. A knight landing on h4 could be annoying. So now black decides when to trade. Black has a lot of natural moves here. Rook c8. Just playing a6 to avoid any pins of the knight. Just try to control the game here. Not so easy to see where white is putting his king. Because if you castle short, the half open h5 could be dangerous. Maybe you put the bishop here on f7 and prepare e5. That's one idea. So instead, black figures, well, he has to put his king somewhere also. So he prepares to castle kingside also. But this was slightly curious. I would have preferred to put it here and just reinforce the pawns and maybe push e5. But catask is playing the long game. He has so much patience. He knows he's stronger when it comes to the positional finesses. And he figures he has more easy, useful moves than white does. So there is some tactical possibilities here, taking here, unless white had protected the pawn with a queen, because once you get rid of this pawn, knight here could be disastrous. Yeah, black is looking to maybe capture here and put a knight on g3. So an excellent defensive move, threatening everywhere here and defending g3. So at least black cannot place anything on g3 yet now, but white's position, especially the h3 pawn, got a bit weaker now. And black took the opportunity, putting pressure here on the h-file. So well, maybe we'll see e5 coming soon. Probably queen e7 just to protect e6. You don't want to have problems after bishop takes f5, do you? Well, maybe it's not so dangerous. This move protected g6 and was very economic. And now indeed e5 came. And JannLee is going for the passive defense. Well, if black takes here, the bishop here is actually trapped. But maybe you can hide it on h4. Yeah, just take here, take bishop h4. And then if white takes, you have knight at g3. Last 10 seconds for both players, but this... he missed an opportunity there, I think. Catask. Actually, I'm not sure what he did here. So this is going to be a time scramble. And JannLee just looks safe. A queen sack. Ouch. Oh no, 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 no. He missed a mate. Let's just see the end there. No, no, no. Just a few moves back here. White was doing super good. And then all of a sudden, well, actually he's doing fine here also. But when black got the extra knight, you have to defend g3 and f2, because now mate is coming on f2. And let's follow. So what's this? It's the d4, d5 opening we've been seeing. Both players inviting h3 and h6 respectively. JannLee playing ambitiously with a g5 pawn thrust, creating some holes in the position. So look at how nicely White is taking advantage here of the f5 square. Also g4 might be hanging at some point after take on f6. So this move actually protects the g4 pawn and also covers f5. So one ambitious move would be f3 here. Not sure if it's good or super bad. So now threatening bishop at f5, picking up either of these two rather weak pawns. Also threatening to take on f6 and simply take on e4. I wonder if you check on b5 just to get away with the bishop, to avoid the fork here on g2. Because the king can run over here. Maybe check c6 and go back. And then run with the king over to the queen side. So this looks very critical. I mean, if White gets his hands on a pawn here, that would be bad news for Black. Wow, quite an audience. Good to see you all here. And this is something I like about catask. He doesn't mind spending a lot of time when he finds himself in a critical position, because I see some players, they play strong moves, but they're usually quite generic and they don't stop to think when they have a critical position. And this is why, one of the reasons why catask is 2900 and not some average 2700 bloke. So now taking here and a pawn here could mean that bishop e7 is mate. This is putting pressure on c7, but now White doesn't have a diag in hand anymore. But a very interesting move. You could switch it back to b4 maybe. Yeah, that's his idea. Black wasted a pawn on b6. And also sort of wasted a knight on d5. I suppose you can take on e7 now. You have so much stuff in hand. So taking here is a bad idea. But is there even a good idea? So the knight is pinned. So if you go back, b4 is hanging with check. But, well, pushing the d pawn is one idea. You could have simply maybe played pawn at g7 also. And then withdraw to f5. But now you always have to reckon with the d pawn advancing one step more. Lots of pieces covering e2. Did white find a safe spot for the queen? It seems so. Now he has all the time in the world just to push the d pawn or take on f6. I don't see anything for black here. And if black captures here, h8 is hanging as well. Threatening mate here on c7. And mate coming. Rook takes, pawn takes, and then pawn check, and the rook on the last rank is mate. 5-2 catask. And you can see how hard it is to play black against catask. So no early bishop development here for catask. Instead he goes for a quick kingside fianchetto, and this time with h6. And putting the queen on e8 is the typical defensive move, defending both g6 indirectly, but also the pawn on c6. I wonder if one idea here for black could be to take on b2 with the rook, because if white takes back you can take on c3. So even now, take here. And what's happening? Black gave up a piece for a couple of pawns, but he gained some momentum here on the king side. Got some material back, and the king is up on the third rank. Although black doesn't have much material here, he needs to find a quick way. Maybe this move is the quickest. You're threatening to trade on f4 and e5. Because you need something to throw on the fire here. Well, black certainly has compensation, but I don't know if it's full compensation. I wonder how you handle the defense here. I mean, you would love to put a pawn here, go back with the king, maybe play h3, another pawn on f3, but that's just wishful thinking, because black will do everything to keep his initiative here. Yeah, we see two experts here, Yasugi, the reigning world champion, and R13, former world champion, discussing this position. And black has indeed practical play here. So it's not a matter of maybe if he is theoretically correct, but he has some strong practical chances. R13 is pointing out something here in the opening. Catask actually played h6 first just to avoid bishop g5. So a difficult defensive task here set for JannLee. He knows he's probably a bit better here. Let's check with the computer afterwards what the computer thinks about the position around move 20. I think the computer prefers white, but this could swing around so quickly. I mean, if black just takes here on h4, the king is up on the 4th rank. Because taking here threatens bishop g2 check, maybe. Or is it a threat? King here. You have to be careful so you don't get mated here on the 3rd rank. Well, bishop at g2 first is an obvious candidate also. White is forced to take, and then knight takes h4 with check. Yeah, I'm pretty sure bishop at g2 will follow here. There's a knight. Okay, he took on h4 actually. Reckoning that white needed to take back with the king. And maybe g5 check? Why not g5? I like g5. So the white king is not coming back. That's the problem. If you go back, you can take on f3, and if you take with the queen, you have a fork on h4. Checking from a distance, so if king g2, you have the fork on h4. You wouldn't have that if you checked on h4. So white picks up a pawn there for free. I'm not sure if it's better to take with the rook or maybe even with the knight. Because taking with the knight prepares bishop check on g2 also, and also threatens the queen. So white is so weak here. Pawns landing here on the picking up a rook here maybe. Yeah, I could just take on b2 if you want to. So many good moves for black. And look at the black fortress here. He's just untouchable. Maybe pawn d2 or f3. Giving the queen for a couple of light pieces. And mate is coming soon. 6-2. Wow, catask. Just unstoppable. Let's have a look at the position there. So white slightly better here, but black has an idea. And all of a sudden, the computer doesn't like white so much anymore. Well, white is slightly better, but black definitely has compensation. Yeah, you can see. Very unclear position. Black probably better here. And after this, black was just much better. He had a lot of ways to finish this. And let's follow catask. Let's see what's happening in the opening. So this time JannLee doesn't go for the h6 g5 fianchetto. Instead he plays f6. Both players... Oh, he didn't take on d3. So black looks a little weak here. This is a rather rigid pawn setup. The knight on f4 would be lovely. How do you play this? Do you put a bishop here maybe, putting pressure on d5? One crazy idea would be to simply take on d5 and then play bishop at e6. But maybe it's too crazy. Because it would threaten d5 and it would threaten to put a pawn on f7. Maybe catask is thinking about knight takes d5. Catask having a sip on his beer, maybe? Oh, we're not at the... Oh, he did take on d5. Oh, sorry. Missed a lot of moves here. Sorry. And what happened here when he took on d5? So the king is out on the 7th rank. Weaknesses. And he could start hammering on the f5 pawn, maybe with a pawn here on g4. This is very similar to an earlier game here, where catask gained material and black never got the chance to place his extra pieces on the board, and he just got pushed around. Yeah, black probably better here, but practical chances for for white. I wonder if we should take on h6. Looks a bit crazy, but take. Is it really that dangerous? So the king could run over here to the queen side now. And these knights are doing a terrific job keeping the black position together. Yeah, the white attack just got to a standstill here. White getting a bit desperate. Surely there is nothing for white here. Maybe simply protect everything, because if you take and take, f6 is an escape square. Well, JannLee has everything defended here. He just needs to stay safe. A few more moves. Just watch out for the f5 square when the queen leaves, so you don't get forked here on f5. So probably a wise decision to put the bishop here. Well, not really threatening anything. Catask resigns, and we are at the final game. And impressive win there by JannLee, who fought off the white attack. Once again we see the early h6, which prepares kingside fianchetto. And this time JannLee goes on the offense and plays an early h4. And before we saw a trade on c6 and another knight on e5 when black defended with queen e8. I don't think that promises white anything. So what do you do? The problem here is that you really need one more pawn to crash through. I liked an idea Zixon had in this tournament when he was playing this as black. He played an early c5, well this would be c4, just to trade off a pawn when the white attack here is just more dangerous. Now this looked like a slight oversight, but black didn't dare to take on d1 because of the white attack. The h5 is open. And the black king is being sucked out. But is it really dangerous? e7 looks like a safe square. Yeah, of course white would like to have a bishop. This bishop defends e6 and f5. So white would very much like to trade. In fact, it's probably not possible to take here. Or is it? I'm thinking pawn check here, and if you go in this direction you have pawn check, but maybe you can take on e2 and then go, no, you cannot go here. So what do you do here? Do you go back with the bishop? Actually a bit dangerous here for black. Nice aggressive idea. And this is sort of what Zixen did against catask, randomizing a bit, taking a chance. So both e4 and c4 are covered by the knight and the bishop. So there are no dangerous knight checks if the king takes. So what's the plan? Okay. Now if you take here, bishop takes, pawn takes, knight check here, and it's all over. Queen check and mate. So you don't take back here on c3. Probably go to e2 instead, but now what? This is just over. Check here and mate. Okay. Oversight there by JannLee. Let's look at the last game. See what happened. Big congratulations to catask, who won 7-3, and he will win the Candidates tournament, and he will face Yasugi99 later this year for the world title in Crazy House. So this is probably not so good, taking on h6 actually. But here there was apparently something better, taking on e5, d takes e5, and then knight g4. Okay, I'm not entirely convinced. Taking on f7 looks good here, and then h5. Yeah. And bishop g4 was bad. Yeah, take on g6. Taking on g4 looks okay. Pawn b7, very instructive. Looks even stronger. So how to do this? White played bishop e2, looks perfectly fine. He probably should, oh, he could take there. But taking on g4 was bad. Okay, so what do you do here with white? You have tremendous compensation for the queen. Knight at g3 is the computer suggestion, but look how the evaluation dropped. I don't think it's so clear. Maybe it's better to not take on d2. No, that's just bad, actually. So, okay, so knight g3. What happens here? Actually, the computer changed his mind. Unclear. It's unclear. Obviously. Very interesting last game here, but unfortunately JannLee took on g4, and then it's made in a few moves. And catask found the quickest mate. Thank you so much for watching. Hang on, I will raid someone's stream if I can find one that I like.